Well, welcome to the 700 Club. For the first time in 25 years, the Speaker of the House addressed Israel's parliament. Just days after the Jewish state celebrated its 75th anniversary, Kevin McCarthy cited the modern miracle of Israel's founding.
The Speaker also pledged that the United States would stand with Israel against a nuclear threat from Iran. And he told the press that if President Biden doesn't invite Prime Minister Netanyahu to Washington, he will. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem on this historic visit.
Speaker Kevin McCarthy came at the invitation of Israel's Speaker of the Knesset, Amir Ohana. Together, they reviewed an honor guard and laid a wreath in memory of the fallen soldier. Beyond the ceremonies here at the Knesset, Speaker McCarthy reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to prevent the Islamic Republic of Iran from becoming a nuclear power.
As we stand shoulder to shoulder against Iran's regional aggression, we must always remain resolute in our commitment that Iran will never acquire a nuclear weapon.
McCarthy's speech came just days after Israel celebrated their 70th anniversary, and he celebrated how the nation's birth fulfilled biblical prophecy.
The prophet Isaiah predicted a brighter future to come. Inspired by God, he shared this command: arise, shine, thy light to come. My friends, today, 75 years after declaring independence, Israel's lights shine brighter than ever before. Ladies and gentlemen, Israel's rebirth is nothing less than a modern miracle, and I thank you for it.
McCarthy said the U.S. House of Representatives recently passed a bipartisan resolution celebrating both the anniversary and the Abraham Accords, while also warning the #1 threat to Israel and those accords is Iran. During a news conference following his speech, CBN News asked the Speaker about U.S. military cooperation with Israel against Iran. You made a commitment in your speech that the U.S. will not allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon. Right now, there's a sense here in Israel sometimes they may have to go it alone. Would you recommend to the administration that would join Israel militarily if they have to?
An armed nuclear Iran is not a safe place to be for the world. And I think it's very clear with the people behind me as well. We will never stand to allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon.
During this visit, McCarthy also met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He told a Hebrew publication that if President Biden doesn't invite Netanyahu to Washington, he will. Former Israeli ambassador to the UN and Knesset member Danny Danon told CBN News the threat of Iran is a major reason Netanyahu needs to be at the White House.
The American people should be worried about nuclear Iran the same way we are worried about it. It's a global effort, and I expect that President Biden will invite Prime Minister Netanyahu to the White House to discuss those issues. It must happen ASAP.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, the Knesset, Jerusalem.
Well, that invitation should come quickly. When you talk about world politics in Iran, they have two slogans. One is the little Satan, and that would be Israel. And guess who the great Satan is? Well, that's you and me right here in the United States. If they do acquire nuclear weapons, they've already demonstrated they have missile technology. They've already demonstrated they have drone technology. It's not a big stretch to say they would use that technology against us, the great Satan. In other news, Speaker McCarthy has received his own invitation from the president to the White House. The topic, growing concern that the government is running out of money. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That's right, Gordon. The president invited Speaker McCarthy, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, and other congressional leaders for a May 9th summit on raising the debt ceiling. They're convening after Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned Congress that the government could begin defaulting on some of its debts as early as June 1st. The president and the speaker are at odds over raising the $31.4 trillion debt limit. The GOP-led House passed a bill last week to raise the cap by $1.5 billion while calling for nearly $5 trillion in spending cuts. The president and Senate Democrats reject the bill, calling on Republicans to pass a standalone measure to increase the debt limit. Well, as we inch closer to the 2024 presidential election, the harsh rhetoric is expected to heat up. But one GOP candidate is taking a different tack. Former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson says we need more grace in politics, and he's also banking on the notion that a growing number of Republicans want to return to a more traditional party. CBN chief political analyst David Brody talked with Hutchinson about his approach.
The field of aspiring GOP presidential candidates is growing.
Today, I am announcing that I am a candidate for President of the United States.
Asa Hutchinson certainly has the resume. Former governor, U.S. congressman, and top positions on border security and drug enforcement in the George W. Bush administration. His goal of restoring civility to an angry national discourse will be a linchpin.
I think we need more grace. I think we need more compassion. And I think we need to listen more. And we need leaders that set the right example.
Which leads us to the clear frontrunner, Donald J. Trump.
Can I ask you a straight-up question? Is part of the reason that you're getting in to say we can't have Donald Trump in the White House again as a party? Is that part of what's going on here?
Sure, there's a factor there, but let me explain it. First of all, the biggest motivation is that the Biden policies are taking us the wrong direction.
Number one, right.
But also our party, GOP, needs a course correction, and that the GOP, I don't believe, can win in a November election with Donald Trump leading the pack.
The challenge for Asa Hutchinson is that this is not simply the grand old Republican Party. Trump changed it. Rather than protector of the world, there's more of an America First attitude. For example, this populist arm of the party doesn't believe in spending money overseas for, say, the war in Ukraine, if it means less spent at home.
Well, we can do both. Now, and you've got to put it in perspective. The Biden administration spent over $1 trillion in a stimulus package. You know, in terms of what we're spending in Ukraine, is less than $200 billion. And we're talking about world peace issues. So that's not unusual. I think that's a false argument that's being presented.
So the challenge for Hutchinson, especially in a crowded field, is to get noticed and gain momentum. He checks the box as a strong conservative on social issues, especially abortion, so that will help. And he believes the evangelical vote is make or break for him.
I like the Iowa dynamic and being able to campaign there. And the evangelical vote is very important to us. The evangelical vote is going to determine who's going to be the next Republican nominee to a certain extent. They're going to influence that.
And he plans to pave the campaign trail with elements of his faith journey.
I memorized the Romans Road to Salvation, and I trust the Lord as my Savior. And so that faith journey has been important in my personal life, my family life, but also has guided public service.
It'll be an uphill battle for sure. Hutchinson will have to navigate a changing party, plus withstand a likely Trump barrage. In the meantime, he's praying.
What's the prayer that you pray at night about the way forward, not just for your candidacy, but for the country?
I always ask for prayer for wisdom. And James talks about wisdom, that there's an earthly wisdom in which we know how to deal in the affairs of man. Daniel reflected that. Joseph reflected that. But there's also the eternal wisdom in which we can see over the horizon to eternity and worry about not just the judgment of history on our decisions, but the judgment of eternity.
David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, David. A new report on global religious freedom cites rising persecution against people of faith, ranging from state-sponsored discrimination to imprisonment and even death. The annual report by the bipartisan U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom focuses on the world's worst offenders. Myanmar, China, Iran, North Korea, and Saudi Arabia among the 12 nations already on the list. This year, 5 new countries were added: Afghanistan, India, Nigeria, Syria, and Vietnam. Rabbi Abraham Cooper tells CBN News that while persecution is increasing around the world, it's harshest on people living in totalitarian regimes.
Religion is under assault religious freedom is something that is denied by many governments. God is the number one enemy. Religious belief is the number one enemy in any system that demands a fealty, a total fealty to the dictators or the regimes that are there.
The report includes recommended actions the White House and Congress can take to address religious freedom violations. And Gordon, commissioners believe every country named in the report is watching to see how the U.S. will respond.
They are watching and they are waiting, but will we get any action out of the divided Congress or this administration? And unfortunately, I don't think we will. So the law mandates that this report be made and that these countries be named, but then it's up to our State Department, it's up to our Senate, it's up to our Congress to actually do something about it and say we stand for religious freedom, we stand for freedom of conscience. I also don't have any hope that the UN will enforce their own standards. And freedom of conscience is actually in the UN standard. To be a member state, you have to say, we adhere to these principles. But over and over again, in today's modern world, we're seeing that people don't have freedom of conscience. They don't have freedom of religion. They don't have freedom of assembly. They don't even have freedom of speech. What are we going to do as people to say, no, this should not be? These totalitarian regimes should not have this kind of control. And then countries that are newly added to the list, like India being added, here's one of the largest democracies in the world, but they're now becoming a totalitarian regime where they're enforcing a particular outlook and a particular religion on everyone else. So what are we going to do about it? Well, that's the question that will get answered in the few months ahead.